It was a bright Saturday afternoon in the middle of summer, the kind of day when the air feels alive and everyone seems to be smiling. The city was buzzing with traffic, music, and chatter. But on the top floor of a grand old hotel, a very different kind of buzz filled the air. Staff rushed back and forth, silver trays clinking, glasses being polished, flowers being arranged, and chairs being perfectly lined up. Everything had to be flawless. That evening, the ballroom would host one of the biggest charity events of the season, a dazzling gala organized by a well-known socialite named Victoria Langford. People knew her for her expensive taste, sparkling jewelry, and the way she always made sure every camera in the room pointed in her direction. Her parties were legendary, and tonight's event was meant to be the highlight of the year. Down in the kitchen, the atmosphere was completely different. The cooks were sweating, calling out orders, trying to keep up with the rush. Among the servers getting ready upstairs was a young woman named Emily Carter. She was dressed in the same black and white uniform as the others, her hair neatly tied back, her apron freshly ironed. To most of the guests who would walk through those ballroom doors later that evening, Emily would be invisible, just another waitress moving quietly from table to table. But to her, this job meant everything. Emily wasn't from a wealthy background. She worked full-time at a small cafe during the day and took evening shifts at events like this to help pay for her mother's medical bills. Her mom had been unwell for a while, and every extra dollar mattered. Emily didn't complain, though. She just worked hard, always smiling, always polite. She had a natural kindness that made people feel at ease, even when they didn't notice her name tag. What no one knew was that behind that calm smile lived a girl with big dreams, dreams that had been pushed aside by responsibility. When she was younger, Emily had wanted to be a singer. She used to spend hours singing to her reflection in the mirror or at the small church choir in her neighborhood. Her voice had something special, warm, emotional, and pure. But after her father passed away suddenly, her family's finances fell apart. She had to give up her music lessons, then her college plans. Life became about bills, work, and survival. Still, sometimes when no one was watching, she hummed softly while cleaning tables or setting dishes. Music was the only thing that helped her forget how hard life had become. As evening approached, the guests began to arrive. Expensive cars lined up outside the hotel entrance, and photographers flashed their cameras as people stepped out in glittering gowns and black tuxedos. The ballroom came alive with laughter, music, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Emily moved through the crowd quietly, carrying trays of canapés and drinks. She had worked enough events to know how to fade into the background, how to be quick but invisible. The smell of perfume and champagne mixed in the air, and the sound of the band playing filled the room. Everywhere she looked, there were diamonds, designer dresses, and people laughing a little too loudly. She couldn't help but notice how different this world felt from her own. At the center of it all stood Victoria Langford, the host of the night. She was dressed in a glittering silver gown that shimmered under the lights, her blonde hair pinned perfectly, her smile wide but calculated. She walked through the room like she owned it, greeting her guests with air kisses and compliments that didn't sound very real. Victoria liked to be admired. She loved attention, and she loved power even more. The staff knew that working one of her events meant being careful, very careful. She had a reputation for being demanding, and sometimes cruel, especially when things didn't go her way. Emily had never served at one of Victoria's parties before, but she had heard the stories. Still, she reminded herself to stay focused. This was just another job. Smile, serve, stay quiet. That was her rule. As she passed by the grand piano, she caught herself softly humming along to the tune the band was playing. It was an old jazz song her father used to listen to. She didn't realize anyone had noticed until she turned around and saw Victoria watching her. For a split second, their eyes met. Emily quickly lowered her gaze and continued working. She didn't want to cause trouble, but Victoria's sharp eyes followed her for a moment longer. She turned to one of her friends and whispered something. They both laughed quietly before turning their attention back to their drinks. Later that evening, the speeches began. Victoria stood on stage, thanking her guests for coming and talking about the importance of the charity cause. Everyone clapped at the right moments, though many seemed more interested in the dessert being served than in the speech itself. Emily moved carefully between the tables, refilling glasses and collecting empty plates. She smiled when guests spoke to her and ignored the occasional rude remarks. Most people treated her kindly enough, but there were always a few who looked at the staff like they were part of the furniture. As the music picked up again, Emily found herself at the back of the room near the large windows. She allowed herself a small break, just long enough to take a deep breath. The city lights sparkled outside and she could see her reflection faintly in the glass. A tired young woman in a plain uniform surrounded by luxury. For a moment, she imagined herself standing on the stage instead of serving drinks, singing, smiling, being heard. But she quickly shook the thought away. Dreams didn't pay hospital bills. When she returned to the main floor, Victoria was in the middle of entertaining a group of important guests near the stage. Emily happened to pass close by, carrying a tray of champagne glasses. She was humming again, just a quiet tune without thinking. It was something she did when she was nervous or tired. Unfortunately, Victoria heard her. "What's that noise?" Victoria said, looking up sharply. "Oh, it's you." Emily froze, the tray still in her hands. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said softly. "I didn't mean to." Victoria interrupted with a laugh that wasn't friendly. "My dear, if you want attention, you could at least sing loud enough for us to hear. Maybe we'll all give you a tip for your performance." Her group of guests chuckled, clearly amused. Emily's cheeks turned red. She didn't know where to look. Every pair of eyes around that table seemed to be staring at her. I'm sorry," she murmured again. "It won't happen again." Victoria smirked and waved her hand as if dismissing her. "See that it doesn't?" Emily turned and walked away quickly, her heart pounding. She went straight to the service area behind the curtain and set the tray down with shaking hands. She felt humiliated, but she tried to swallow her tears. She couldn't afford to lose this job. A fellow waiter looked at her with concern. "You okay?" he whispered. Emily nodded weakly. "Yeah, I'm fine," but she wasn't fine. The laughter still echoed in her ears. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, Victoria was basking in the attention. She loved being the center of every moment, and embarrassing someone else gave her a strange sense of control. To her, the waitress was just part of the background, someone she'd forget by tomorrow morning, but not everyone in the room had laughed. A few guests looked uncomfortable. One man frowned slightly, shaking his head. He had seen enough to know it wasn't right. The night carried on with music, drinks, and laughter filling the air again. Emily returned to work, doing her best to pretend nothing had happened. She smiled when guests asked for refills, kept her posture straight, and tried to push the sting of humiliation away. But deep down, something had shifted. She had been made to feel small in front of hundreds of people, yet a quiet spark began to burn inside her. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something else. A quiet determination, the kind that whispers, "You don't have to stay invisible forever." As the night went on, Emily's eyes wandered toward the stage again. The microphone stood empty, waiting for the next announcement. She couldn't explain it, but she felt something inside her stirring, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The sound of the band faded for a moment as the host's assistant walked up to Victoria, whispering something in her ear. The lights dimmed slightly. Another round of introductions began. Emily continued her work, but that spark didn't leave her. She didn't know it yet, but what had started as a humiliating moment would soon become something far greater, something that no one, not even Victoria Langford herself, could have imagined. And before the night was over, every single person in that grand hall would remember the quiet waitress who dared to sing. The music grew louder as the evening continued, filling the ballroom with laughter and clinking glasses. The air was rich with perfume, champagne, and the faint smell of candles burning on every table. It was the kind of night people would describe as glamorous, but for those working behind the scenes, it was just another long shift. Emily moved quietly between tables, careful not to draw attention again. She had already been embarrassed once that night, and the memory still burned fresh in her mind. Every time she passed by the area where Victoria and her guests were seated, she could feel their laughter echoing in her head. She tried to focus on her work. The trick, she told herself, was to stay invisible. That was how you survived in places like this, by being polite, silent, and invisible. She walked toward the kitchen doors, balancing a tray full of empty glasses, when one of the senior waiters, an older man named Daniel, caught her eye. He had worked at the hotel for years and had seen all kinds of people come and go, kind ones, rude ones, and everything in between. "You all right, kid?" he asked quietly, Noticing her pale face, Emily nodded quickly. I'm fine. Just tired. He gave her a small, understanding smile. Don't take it personal. People like her. They think they own the world. Just keep your head up, Emily smiled faintly. Thanks. She appreciated his kindness, but deep down it didn't make the sting go away. It wasn't just what Victoria had said. It was the laughter that followed. It was how easily people found amusement in someone else's embarrassment. When she returned to the ballroom, the lights had dimmed slightly, giving the room a golden glow. The band had switched to slower, softer songs. Couples were dancing in the center, their movements elegant and practiced. Emily stopped for a moment, just watching. The music was beautiful, a gentle melody that reminded her of her childhood. Without thinking, she began to hum again, softly under her breath. It was automatic, something she did without realizing it. Music had always been her comfort, her escape. But before she could catch herself, someone nearby heard her. A man sitting at one of the side tables turned and smiled. That's a lovely tune. You've got a nice voice, Emily froze. Oh, I'm sorry, sir, she said quickly, her face turning red. I didn't mean to. He waved his hand kindly. No, don't apologize. You sound wonderful. You should sing more often. She smiled shyly, unsure how to respond. It felt nice to hear those words, but she didn't want to draw any attention. Thank you, sir. But I think my boss would prefer I keep to serving drinks. The man chuckled softly. That may be true, he said, taking a sip of his wine. Still, you've got something special there. She nodded politely and walked away before anyone else noticed. But what she didn't realize was that Victoria had been nearby, listening. Victoria was in a sour mood. The evening hadn't gone exactly as she had hoped. A few important guests hadn't shown up, and one of the sponsors had hinted that next year they might not donate as much. Little things like that irritated her deeply. She liked perfection, control, and admiration, and when things didn't go her way, she often found someone else to take it out on. So when she overheard the small exchange between the guest and Emily, she saw an opportunity to make herself the center of attention again. As Emily passed by with another tray, Victoria raised her voice just enough for others to hear. Well, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Our little waitress thinks she's a singer now? The guest nearby chuckled lightly, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet. Emily stopped in her tracks, her heart dropping. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said softly. Victoria cut her off. Don't be shy now. You were humming a moment ago, weren't you? Why not give us a song? You might as well earn your tip the musical way. There was a pause. A few guests exchanged uncertain glances. Some seemed amused. Others looked uncomfortable. Emily stood frozen, not sure what to say. I don't think that would be appropriate, ma'am, she said finally, her voice small. Victoria laughed lightly, pretending it was just harmless fun. Oh, nonsense. It's just a bit of entertainment. Go on, dear, sing something for us. The people around her began murmuring, half teasing, half curious. A few even clapped their hands playfully. Yes, let her sing, someone called out. Emily's stomach twisted. Her face burned with embarrassment. She wanted to disappear, but Victoria wasn't done. Come now, she said, lifting her glass. Surely you're not too shy. You were humming so sweetly earlier. Let's hear it properly. Emily took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly as she clutched the tray. She could have walked away, but that might have made things worse. The hotel's management didn't tolerate rude staff, and she needed this job. I really shouldn't, ma'am, she said again, her voice trembling. Victoria smiled tightly. Then perhaps you should find another way to keep yourself busy instead of distracting guests with your little tunes. That was the final blow. The laughter came again, softer this time, but enough to cut through her. Emily turned away quickly, her eyes stinging. She went straight to the hallway outside the ballroom where she could breathe again. Her chest felt tight. She leaned against the wall and tried to steady herself. The noise of the party continued inside. Laughter, clinking glasses, music. But out here it was quiet. For a long moment she just stood there staring at the floor. She didn't cry. She didn't want to. But the feeling inside her was heavy, like a lump in her throat that wouldn't go away. Daniel found her a few minutes later. You okay? He asked gently. Emily nodded quickly, wiping at her eyes even though no tears had fallen. I'm fine, really, he sighed. Don't let her get to you. Some people get their power from putting others down. I know, Emily whispered. It's just, sometimes it feels like no matter how hard you try, people still look at you like you're nothing. Daniel looked at her with quiet sympathy. You're not nothing. You've got more grace than she'll ever have. Emily smiled faintly, but she didn't reply. After a moment, Daniel returned to work, leaving her alone again. Emily took one last deep breath and decided to go back inside. She wasn't going to let anyone see her broken. When she stepped back into the ballroom, the guests were laughing again. The music had changed to a faster tune, and Victoria was back to her usual self, charming, smiling, pretending to be the perfect host. Emily went about her work silently. She avoided eye contact, kept her head down, and focused on getting through the night. But deep inside her, something had changed. She wasn't angry in the way most people might be. It was more like a quiet fire slowly building. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. The pull of her voice. The urge to sing not for attention or approval, but for herself. Later that night, while the band took a short break, the room filled with a low hum of conversation. People mingled near the stage and the microphone stood there empty. Emily's eyes kept drifting toward it even as she worked. She didn't know what made her do it. Maybe it was the humiliation. Maybe it was the years of silence. Maybe it was the way she had spent her whole life shrinking herself just to fit in. Whatever it was, a thought began to form in her mind, and soft at first, but growing stronger with every passing minute. What if she did sing? Not because Victoria wanted her to, but because she wanted to. Because for once she wanted to be heard. She shook the thought away, embarrassed at herself. It was ridiculous. This was a charity gala, not an open mic night. People would laugh again, maybe worse than before, and yet, every time the band started another song, she found herself mouthing the words silently. Every time someone complimented the music, she felt her heart ache a little. When she glanced across the room, she noticed the man who had complimented her earlier watching her again. He smiled kindly when their eyes met. Not mockingly, but as if he genuinely believed in her. That small gesture made something click inside her. Maybe she could sing. Maybe this time she wouldn't let someone like Victoria take her voice away. The night wasn't over yet, and the chance to do something unexpected still lingered in the air. Victoria didn't know it yet, but the same young woman she tried to humiliate would soon be the reason her grand hall fell silent. Not from laughter, but from awe. The night was half over and the ballroom glowed under soft golden lights. The laughter of wealthy guests echoed against the marble walls, and the scent of roses from the centerpieces mixed with perfume and champagne. Waiters moved swiftly, their trays gleaming under chandeliers while the band played a soft tune in the corner of the room. Emily moved through the hall quietly, her mind far away. She had been working nonstop for hours, but her thoughts weren't on the job anymore. They kept drifting back to what Victoria had said. The laughter. The way she'd been treated like a joke. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake it off. Every time she saw Victoria laughing with her guests, something inside her twisted. But it wasn't anger anymore. It was something deeper. A quiet ache mixed with a strange kind of courage she didn't fully understand. At the far end of the hall, the band's lead singer announced they were taking a short break. The music faded, leaving only the sound of voices and glasses clinking. The microphone stood still and waiting in the center of the stage. Emily's eyes drifted toward it again. That single microphone, that empty space. It almost felt like it was calling to her. She tried to push the thought away. It was crazy. She was a waitress, not a performer. No one here wanted to hear her sing. And yet deep down, she knew that wasn't true. A few hours ago, one of the guests had told her she had a lovely voice. She hadn't forgotten that. Maybe he'd meant it. Maybe not. But even that small kindness had planted a seed. What if, just once, she didn't stay silent? She set her tray down on the counter near the service door and took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She knew she shouldn't, she knew it could cost her job, but some part of her couldn't let the night end this way. She looked around. Daniel, the older waiter, was nearby, stacking plates. "Daniel," she whispered. He turned, surprised by her tone. "What's wrong?" She hesitated. "If I do something a little crazy, will you cover for me?" He frowned. "What do you mean, crazy?" She smiled nervously. "Just crazy enough to remind myself I'm still alive." He studied her for a moment, then sighed. "Just don't get yourself fired, kid." Emily smiled. "I'll try not to." Before she could lose her courage, she walked toward the stage. The crowd was busy chatting and laughing, not paying attention to the quiet waitress weaving through them. The microphone still stood in the center, untouched. A few people noticed her as she stepped up. Murmurs began to spread. A few heads turned. Then suddenly Victoria's voice cut through the room. "What on earth is she doing up there?" The chatter quieted a little. Victoria was standing near the bar, her glass half raised, watching Emily with a mix of amusement and disbelief. Emily swallowed hard but didn't move away. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the microphone. "I'm sorry," she began softly. Her voice was calm but nervous. "I didn't mean to interrupt anyone. I wanted to thank you all for being here tonight. And if it's all right, I'd like to sing one song." A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd. Some people looked curious. Others seemed unsure. Victoria laughed lightly, her voice sharp enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, how charming. Our waitress wants to perform." "Well, go ahead then. Let's see what you've got." Her words carried a mocking tone, but Emily didn't flinch this time. She simply nodded. The room grew still. Even the band members paused, watching from the side. A quiet hum filled the air, that strange, weighty silence that comes before something unexpected. Emily took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her mother, lying in the hospital bed with a weak smile. She thought of her father, who used to sit on the porch playing old songs on his radio. She thought of the girl she used to be, the one who had dreams, before life had forced her to hide them. And then she began to sing. Her voice came out soft at first, almost trembling like a whisper in a quiet room, but within seconds it grew and warm, clear, and full of emotion. She sang from somewhere deep inside, a place untouched by pride or fear. The first verse floated across the room, cutting through every conversation, every movement. The words carried a kind of honesty that silenced even the loudest laughter. People turned in their chairs. Some stopped mid-sentence. The room, once filled with noise, slowly fell into complete silence. Emily's voice filled the space like light spreading through a dark room. It wasn't just beautiful, it was real. Every note seemed to tell a story of pain, hope, and strength. It wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. Victoria, who had been smiling smugly moments before, slowly lowered her glass. Her expression changed, not to anger but confusion. She hadn't expected this. The sound wrapped around the room, touching everyone in different ways. A woman near the front wiped her eyes quietly. A man who had been laughing moments ago now stared motionless. Emily didn't see any of them. Her eyes stayed closed as she sang. It was just her and the music, the one thing that had never left her. By the time she reached the chorus, her voice rose higher, stronger. There was no trace of fear anymore. The girl who had been humiliated hours ago was gone. In her place stood someone brave, someone who had finally remembered who she was. When she finished the last note, it hung in the air like a soft echo that refused to fade. For a few seconds there was only silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that happens when people forget to breathe. Then slowly applause began. One person clapped, then another, then everyone. The sound grew louder, filling the hall like thunder. Emily opened her eyes, stunned. She hadn't expected that. Her heart was racing and her hands trembled again, but this time from disbelief, not fear. People were standing now, cheering, smiling, clapping. Even the band members were applauding. Victoria stood frozen, her lips parted slightly, her eyes wide. For the first time all evening, she had no words. The man who had complimented Emily earlier stood and called out, "That was incredible." The applause grew even louder. Someone shouted, "Encore!" and laughter followed, man. But this time it wasn't cruel. It was warm, genuine. Emily smiled shyly, bowing her head slightly. "Thank you," she said softly into the microphone. "Thank you so much." She stepped down from the stage slowly, her heart still pounding. As she walked past the tables, people reached out to compliment her, strangers smiling, offering kind words. "That was amazing," one woman said. "You have a gift." "Don't ever stop singing," another man added. Emily could hardly believe it. Only an hour ago she had been invisible. Now people were looking at her, not as a waitress, but as someone who mattered. When she finally reached the side of the room, Daniel met her with a grin. "You did it," he said quietly. "You really did it," Emily laughed softly, still in shock. "I can't believe I just did that." "Well," he said with a wink, "believe it. You just stole the whole night." She looked back toward the stage where Victoria still stood. Their eyes met briefly. Victoria tried to smile, but it was strained. The crowd's attention had completely shifted, and for once it wasn't on her. Emily didn't gloat. She simply gave a polite nod and returned to her duties. The applause still echoed in her mind, a sound she knew she would never forget. As the night went on, guests continued to approach her quietly, offering compliments and asking if she had ever performed before. One woman even handed her a business card saying she worked with local artists and would love to hear her sing again. Emily tucked the card into her pocket, unsure what to make of it. By the time the party ended, the air in the room felt different. The mood had changed. People were smiling more genuinely, talking about the waitress with the golden voice. Victoria left early, claiming she wasn't feeling well. Emily stayed until the last table was cleared, her feet aching but her heart full. She walked home that night under the city lights, her uniform still smelling faintly of perfume and champagne. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. As she passed the quiet streets, she caught herself humming again, not out of habit, but out of joy. The sound was soft but steady, like a promise to herself. Something had changed forever that night, and though she didn't know what would come next, she finally believed she was ready for it. The night had ended hours ago, but the sound of applause still echoed in Emily's mind as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She hadn't been able to sleep. Her heart still raced every time she thought about it. The way the crowd had fallen silent, the way the music had filled the room, the way strangers had looked at her afterward with genuine warmth. It almost didn't feel real. For years, she had worked in the background, doing what she had to just to survive. She had learned to keep quiet, to stay small, to never expect more than a polite smile or a thank you. And then, in one unexpected moment, everything had changed. She replayed it in her head again and again, her voice trembling at first, then stronger, the look on people's faces, the feeling of being free, if only for a few minutes. She smiled faintly to herself, but there was still a small part of her that didn't believe it had actually happened. The next morning, she woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. She rubbed her eyes and reached for it, expecting maybe a message from the hotel about her next shift. But when she looked at the screen, she froze. There were dozens of notifications, messages, missed calls, and a flood of social media alerts. She blinked, confused. Then she saw it. Someone had recorded her performance at the party and uploaded it online. The video already had thousands of views. The title read, "Waitress silences entire gala with her voice." Her hands trembled as she tapped the video. There she was, standing on that stage in her plain black uniform, holding the microphone. The sound quality wasn't perfect, but her voice came through clear and full. The comments section was filled with people praising her. "She's amazing. Got chills listening to this. Why isn't she famous? Someone sign her already." Emily covered her mouth, overwhelmed. It didn't feel like her life anymore. It felt like a dream she had accidentally walked into. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Daniel. "You're all over the internet, kid. The hotel phones are ringing off the hook. You might want to check your messages." She couldn't help but laugh softly. Her heart was racing again, but this time with excitement. Later that afternoon, when she arrived at the hotel, the atmosphere felt different. Some of her coworkers smiled as she passed. A few even clapped jokingly. "You're famous now," one of them said. "Don't forget us little people when you make it big." Emily blushed. "Stop it," she said shyly. It was just one song. But as she walked toward the staff lounge, she could feel eyes following her, not with judgment, but with curiosity and admiration. Daniel was waiting for her near the counter, his usual calm expression replaced with a grin. "You've got no idea what you started last night," he said. "Everyone's talking about you," she shook her head. "It doesn't feel real. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Maybe not," he said, "but sometimes the best things happen by accident." He handed her a small stack of papers, printed emails and letters that had come in that morning. "People want to book you for events. Some reporter called asking for an interview. The hotel manager even said the video's been great publicity. You're the star of the week. Emily stared at the papers, speechless. I don't even know what to say. Say you're proud, Daniel replied with a smile. Because you should be. But not everyone was proud. Across town, Victoria Langford sat in her office reading the same headlines. Her name appeared in nearly every article, not as the glamorous hostess she wanted to be, but as the woman who had mocked the waitress who stole the show. The video didn't just make Emily famous. It made Victoria a villain in her own story. She slammed the tablet down on her desk. Ridiculous, she muttered. People love to twist things, but deep down she knew it wasn't twisted. Everyone had seen exactly what happened. The world had seen her cruelty, and Emily's grace in response. For the first time in years, Victoria wasn't the one being praised. She was being criticized. Her assistant peeked into the room. Ma'am, there are a few journalists asking for a comment. No comment, Victoria snapped, cutting her off. And tell them I'm not available. The assistant nodded quickly and disappeared. Victoria stared out the window, anger mixing with something else. Guilt. She hated to admit it, even to herself, but she had gone too far. She had tried to humiliate a young woman for a moment's amusement, and now the whole world was applauding that same woman. Meanwhile, back at the hotel, Emily sat in the break room with her phone, still reading messages from strangers. Some were simple compliments, others were offers, local events, music venues, even a small radio station asking her to perform. She didn't know what to do. It was all happening so fast. Then her phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. Hello? She said softly. Hello, is this Emily Carter? A friendly woman's voice asked. My name is Lisa from Morning Light Radio. We saw your performance online and would love to have you come in for an interview. Maybe even sing live for our listeners. Emily blinked. I don't know. I've never done anything like that before. The woman laughed gently. Don't worry, we'll make it easy. People would love to hear your story. What do you say? Emily hesitated, then smiled. Okay, I'll do it. When she hung up, she felt a mix of nerves and excitement. For once, the world wanted to listen. Really listen. That evening, she visited her mother in the hospital. The older woman looked weak but smiled when Emily walked in. How was work, sweetheart? Her mother asked, her voice soft. Emily smiled, sitting beside her bed. It was different this time. Her mother raised an eyebrow. Different good or different bad? Emily laughed softly. I'll show you. She opened her phone and played the video. Her mother listened, tears forming in her eyes as Emily's voice filled the small hospital room. When the video ended, she reached out and squeezed Emily's hand. Your father would have been so proud, she whispered. You found your voice again? Emily swallowed hard, trying not to cry. I think I did. Over the next few days, things changed quickly. The video spread beyond their city. Local newspapers wrote articles about her. She went on the radio, sang live, and shared her story. How she had been working double shifts, how music had always been her dream, and how one moment of courage had changed everything. People loved her honesty. They saw her as a symbol of hope, proof that kindness and talent could shine through even in the harshest moments. Back at the hotel, she continued to work her shifts, though now everyone treated her differently. Guests recognized her, some even asking for photos. Her co-workers teased her, but always with affection. Through it all, Emily stayed humble. She didn't want fame. She just wanted to sing and to take care of her mother. One afternoon, as she was finishing her shift, she heard a familiar voice call her name. She turned and froze. It was Victoria. The woman looked different. No fancy gown, no sparkling jewelry, just a simple suit and a tired expression. Emily, she said quietly, may I have a word? Emily hesitated, unsure what to expect, but nodded. They stepped aside into a quiet hallway. Victoria took a deep breath. I owe you an apology, she began. What I did that night was cruel. I thought I was being funny, but I was wrong. You didn't deserve that. Emily was silent for a moment, studying her. She could see genuine regret in Victoria's eyes. I appreciate you saying that, Emily said softly. But honestly, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Victoria nodded slowly. I know, I saw the video. You were incredible. You reminded me that there's more to people than what we see on the surface. There was a pause. Then she added, "If you ever need support, connections, venues, whatever, I'd like to help." "It's the least I can do." Emily smiled gently. "Thank you, but I think I'm okay now." Victoria gave a small nod, almost relieved. "Then I wish you all the success in the world." As she walked away, Emily felt a strange sense of peace. There were no hard feelings left, only gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that had led her to this moment. That night, she sat by her window looking out at the city lights, holding the small business card from the woman at the gala. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. She knew who she was now. Not just a waitress, not just a singer, but someone who had learned to stand tall when others tried to make her small. And that, she realized, was more powerful than any spotlight. The days that followed felt like a dream that Emily didn't want to wake up from. Life had changed so quickly that she sometimes had to stop and remind herself it was real. One song, one brave moment, had opened doors she never imagined could exist. It had been a few weeks since the gala. The video of her singing was still spreading online, reaching people in different countries. She received hundreds of messages from strangers, kind words, encouragement, and stories from people who said her voice had touched them. Some even said her courage had inspired them to take chances in their own lives. Emily often sat by her mother's hospital bed, reading those messages aloud. Her mother would smile proudly every time, squeezing Emily's hand and saying, "See, sweetheart? People can hear your heart in your voice." Emily had always thought music was just something she loved, but now she realized it could be something much more. Something that connected people, that gave hope, that reminded others of kindness and beauty. Her days became busier. She still worked some shifts at the hotel, but now she also met with small event organizers, producers, and local music groups. She started performing at charity events and small concerts, sometimes for free, sometimes for small payments. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the joy of singing again. At every event, she saw faces light up as soon as she started to sing, and every time she finished, people would come up to her and tell her how much her music had moved them. That feeling of touching hearts and was something she could never get used to. It filled her with quiet happiness. One afternoon, she received a call from a man named Thomas who worked with a community theater. He had seen her video and wanted her to perform at a charity concert they were planning. "It's for children who can't afford music lessons," he explained. "We want the night to show that music belongs to everyone, no matter where they come from." "Your story fits perfectly with that message." Emily smiled as she listened. "I'd love to be part of it," she said without hesitation. The concert was set to take place at a large community hall, not as grand as the gala where everything began, but still beautiful. There would be families, local artists, and kids performing. It felt right to her, humble, full of heart, just like her journey. When the evening arrived, Emily stood backstage, holding the same microphone she had bought years ago when she still dreamed of singing for a living. The lights were warm and golden. She could hear the soft chatter of the audience and the laughter of children. She took a deep breath. Her mother was sitting in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. That alone made every nervous flutter in Emily's chest worth it. When her turn came, she walked out onto the stage. The applause was gentle but full of warmth. She smiled and greeted the crowd softly. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice calm and kind. "I'm not used to big stages, but I'm very happy to be here tonight. A few weeks ago, I was just serving drinks at a party, trying to get through another shift. I never imagined that moment would lead me here. I just want to thank everyone who believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." The audience clapped again, and she began to sing. Her voice carried through the hall, pure, full of feeling, steady and strong. She sang a song about hope, about second chances, about finding beauty even when life feels heavy. People listened quietly, some holding hands, some smiling through tears. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. Children cheered, parents stood up, and her mother clapped harder than anyone. Emily bowed, her heart full. After the concert, as she stepped down from the stage, Thomas came over with a huge grin. "You were incredible," he said. "Would you believe we've already had 2 music schools ask for your contact? They want you to teach workshops for their students." "Teach?" Emily repeated, surprised. "Yes," he said. "You've got something special, not just your voice, but your story. Kids need to hear that." You could show them that dreams aren't just for the lucky ones. Emily smiled, touched by his words. I'd love to, she said softly. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Emily walked back into the empty hall. The stage lights were off now, but a few beams of light still slipped through the windows. She stood there for a while, looking out at the rows of empty seats.